Test. Test.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi.
Boy, you're optimistic about going to Israel, right?
Yeah, I mean, I am, but I'm also aware that it's possible we will not be going, but I'm optimistic, yes. If I don't, then I'll be really, it'll be a real, I have to stay up.
It's just so horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
And boy, you know, it's the ramifications in this country are just, I mean, you heard about Cornell,
No.
the big anti-Semitic protest and threats to the kosher kitchen building, and so the cops have told students to stay away.
Yeah, that's just.
I mean, that's where Hillel is, and and Tulane.
Yeah.
I'm sure your father told you about Tulane, right?
I told him about it, actually.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Americans and Jews better get smartened up and start arming themselves if they want to protect themselves and their families.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
You don't want to go down like sheep.
Thanks, Jerry. Nice to see you.
Yeah, I came around because I wanted to cover my list on Hanukkah.
In the social hall.
And how do I?
You, yeah, I'll put it down.
Yeah, okay.
Put it down and I'll
Yeah.
get rid of it.
Thanks.
Yeah. It's locked.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Jim, how are you?
I'm very good, Kathy, and you?
Good. Yeah, thanks.
Matt?
Oh. Huh.
You heard there was some fighting at Tulane University.
I know, he said I said, I'm sure your father told you about it. He said, no, he told his father. You heard about Cornell.
No, tell me, what?
Apparently there were all kinds of anti-Israel protests and some threats made against Jews. So the cops have told students to stay away from the building. It houses the kosher kitchen
Oh,
and Gilel and
that's one of the places that my granddaughter's applying. I think she wants it for early decision as well. But she's applying for about 5 or 6 other places.
there's no place that
There's no place, that's right, yes.
and it's getting worse than it's ever been. Ever been in my life. I'm sure yours too. Well, I don't know. No, not your life. Not your life in Ukraine. I have a friend who, she and her husband arrived in Israel like October 3rd, maybe. They were in Tel Aviv in a hotel when the when Hamas did its thing October 7th.
Are they still there?
No, they got out. They were with a tour, and the tour was wonderful about arranging their passage out of Israel. But when they got to the border with Jordan on a bus, in Israel, they had to get out of the bus
Yes.
and walk across the border and get on another bus with a Jordanian driver. And they also had to go through customs. And the guy at customs said, and where are you coming from? And they said, Israel. And he said, no, you mean Palestine.
Wow.
Hi, how are you?
Very well. See, that area, the Gaza Strip, that's the only place where Arab forces advanced in the 1948 war. Egyptian forces, they advanced. That's the only place they advanced, and then the armistice lines were set. Right there.
Oh, is that how that was?
That's how it was created, yes,
Oh.
yes.
That should be part of it.
Well, it's, it's never been part of Judea and Samaria. Consequently, all Israeli governments have been willing to give that up, unlike the areas of what's called the West Bank.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been reading about Netanyahu over the last few
I
days.
have, yes.
Oh, my God, he has talked about.
Well,
I don't know why
that's
they
true,
won't.
but no, it's useless to make these decisions in the middle of a conflict. So he's sort of like a Chamberlain who had to go after the.
No, I know what you're saying, and I used to agree with you until he pulled this stuff about blaming the army and everybody else for this.
Good morning.
Hello.
That's divisive.
There's a big dispute going on. I was reading in Mosaic about was the 1973 Egyptian Syrian attack a surprise? Was it an Egyptian day, or did Israel
Made it.
deliberately refrain from mobilizing and fighting? And what
Is this
might have
okay?
been the reason for it?
Oh, I don't know about that one.
And
That's enough.
the role
Yeah,
of
Barb will be
Messenger and
coming
Nixon
here.
and such.
I don't know about that. That's,
Hey, Rabbi.
Which apparently was very favorable to the US. Unlike
Oh,
the
so don't do
State
that.
Department and other groups which
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi.
alienate themselves from Israel.
Yochanan is at sea,
So.
Yeah,
this question-
patrolling
I mean,
the
there was a
God, the
commission
coast.
after
Oh my
this
God.
that investigated, but
And
it's still a dispute. And
his
this would have been a
mother
surprise
Yeah.
in any
is
case.
remains in
I'm not
Jerusalem,
sure. So there's
and
some
she's
intelligence
volunteering
failure,
at the local
I mean, it was
hotel
happened on October 7th.
right.
where they
Some
have
intelligence
All these
failure,
people. who are living
families,
there.
children.
failure of imagination,
So-
because they knocked out all of the cameras, you
That's
know,
it.
that were, I don't know, it's a, so good use.
Look at this.
Yeah, I used to be sort of favorable to him as a writer, but of course, he's attracted by the other people around him. I mean, by the right-wing parties in the coalition. Now, he himself would anything about these.
One more time.
Judicial
That's
things
good.
or expansion to a state. In a coalition, you have to go along with the parties, so at least now the army in the cabinet, so it's not like. Anyway, if you had him removed right now, we'll again split.
Oh, shoot.
the
I've still got my box of
coalition
candles in my
would
purse. I never did the other
oppose to that, so.
Yeah.
That's not
No wonder my
your
purse was getting really heavy.
like all the mayor ultimately.
It was nice yesterday.
It was a great,
Oh, good.
I think it's amazing how the staging, for example, the staging of the imagination in some ways succeeds. Certainly, say, they truly made production.
Yeah. And that was.
Hello, Tara.
Nice to meet that Robin too.
How you doing?
Okay.
She'd be a wonderful Echelon member.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
She took on the mailing list. She's so content.
That's it. And she actually is it here.
Oh, really?
Oh.
She's so good. Well, now she's into the mail.
I didn't
She's
realize.
well versed with
Yes.
the landscape here.
Yes.
What are you doing? Why does you not name the trees?
That's because I tend to hear pretty well, but I just didn't put them on, my hair was wet after the shower and I didn't.
Yeah, I was hoping they were working okay.
I wore them when I went to the opera yesterday to match it through. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. My father, he rarely wears his hearing aids. He can't do a thing without them.
Oh,
Then he can't get any contrary opinions. My right voice is virtually normal, it's my left ear that uses that.
It's like
I
6
don't
inches.
hear, well, either ear, but one is worse than the other. It's the high pitch sounds which use the ability to distinguish words, which rapidly leads to cognitive decline. We haven't had this lecture from your audiologist yet. So I said, yes, sign me up. I don't want that.
I was until this year, I was in his atrocious Arabic class. I, so speaking of cognitive decline, the reason I mentioned that, I heard that for Westerners, Arabic is one of the 3 most difficult languages to learn. And I think that I should improve my Spanish, so that I'm never going to be a good conversationalist in Arabic.
Somebody sitting here?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
Thanks, Brad.
I will probably try to take his class in a few years, but right now, Hebrew's plenty. Until I've gotten that, I'm real comfortable, I'm not trying to tackle another language. Because I've also been working on my Spanish because of my daughter-in-law and grandson.
One of the disputes that I read, I'm not very familiar with class, because whether shalom is related to the word Islam. And this one writer argued it's not, that Islam is the same SLM.
Yeah,
But that Islam really means submission.
Yes,
As
that's what I've heard,
As opposed
yes.
to peace.
Yeah.
How do we do
You have a large commentary. What commentary book do you have? Leon Katz. Oh, yes, he's very,
Interesting.
very well.
He's
versed
fabulous.
writer,
He's
yes.
fabulous.
Last year, what, altars?
Yes.
Yeah,
David just said 6. I know, but
well, he takes it one step beyond. And it's
Well, I find,
I did that.
I find altars and notes where a lot of times he's discussing the ambiguities of the Hebrew.
Yeah.
These look like two
hold
stones,
on.
like two ancient.
I was just saying, they're so cute.
Yeah, they are cute.
I've never used one.
Thank you.
High-tech stuff like
I
6
know.
and 8.
I
I didn't understand what you were saying.
The diaspora class, that's Stuart Moss.
I thought you were saying
Oh,
it
yeah.
introduces 6.
That's a,
I put a blog it in on the.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Maybe it'll be
It's
offered
very
again.
easy, he's fascinating.
Is it one of the senior division classes or?
so the history of the space.
Turn the bar, when you bring your own mug and just leave it at the bar.
Yeah. It's safe on the waste paper.
Seed store.
Oh.
They were dealing with
Chinese.
Latin
Hey,
American
Stein.
just Chinese.
All right, everyone. Hey, good to see you, Nate. All right, so welcome back, everyone. We're welcome to, for one or two people.
Good tip.
If you are new here for whatever reason, can you please just, I ripped this, I did. Can you please fill your name out on this, just so we have your email address so we can put you on our mailing list for, there you go.
Sorry.
Just mailing list for
There you go.
core study stuff. And why don't we take a moment to go around the room and introduce ourselves? Just
yeah.
because
No,
we
I
have-
just have to write down.
Just because we have a couple of new people.
Can I
Nick,
don't
take
have
that, by the way.
wait, how far does it go?
How far does what go?
Does it
Yeah.
go to the end of Genesis?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, can I have one, please?
Take,
Yeah.
take this. And,
I didn't mark.
you need one?
For Maryland.
What's?
This is, goes to the end of Genesis.
This isn't,
Yeah, I have that.
You have one?
this one works.
Okay, we need one more.
Need more? Here's one more. Anybody else
There
need
we
a
go.
text?
I have it, I'm sorry.
Okay, sure. So why don't we just quickly go around and introduce ourselves? For those of you who are on Zoom, you just get to watch. We see your names on the screen. Except for Leonore Feldman. You left out the E, Eleanor.
Get the behind me.
Oh, my God. All right, so why don't we just, should we move on?
They
Dave,
smell
we started,
good,
we'll
don't
just
they?
go around the
They
room
do.
here.
They smell good.
We'll go around the table and then we'll go around the outer edge. Sherry had a nice seat and then wait, is that her Tanakh right there?
It is.
Someone tried to sit in front of her Tanakh.
No, next to,
All
no,
right, so-
you can move in.
We can move it.
So let's start from on the inside of the table and then we'll work our way to the outside. So just to reintroduce ourselves. David,
Sorry,
you start.
Sherry.
My name is David.
Barbara Wingrove.
Sherry, are you?
Laura Murray.
Kathy Sitta.
Jim Wagner.
Tom D. Kornfeld.
Win Walpole.
Karen Cook.
Bob Sikora.
Ari Goldstein,
Mary Kim.
and now on the outside, wait, there we go.
Nick Dolman.
Arthur,
Marilyn Lewis.
glad to have everyone here. So we are, I don't know, there's always parts of me that wants to talk, but at the same time, just go down a little rabbit hole. I'll just say a couple words. this is not new, but every time I think about it, every time I think about what's happening in Israel right now, I think really that it's more about anti-Semitism. Every moment that moves forward, it becomes more clear that this is anti-Semitism and not anti-Zionism. I mean, granted, as Bernard Lewis correctly said 30 or 40 years ago, there is no difference between those two. I believe there is a difference. I believe you can be, believe it or not, you can be anti-Semitic without being anti-Zionist. I think because Zionism becomes irrelevant for true anti-Semites. But I think that for many people, the way that they broadcast their anti-Semitism is through anti-Zionism. But in truth, it's just anti-Semitism. And why? Because Hillels wouldn't be kids at Hillel campuses wouldn't feel threatened in America if it was Zionism. Because this sophomore at whatever college, I'm using it randomly, certainly had nothing to do with what's going on in Israel, and yet he is being attacked, beaten up. We wouldn't have extra police officers here at the temple right now. I don't think anyone here is responsible for that which is happening in Israel right now. We might, in our hearts, care about it deeply, but that doesn't mean we're so we're not responsible for that. And I think there's not a single person with any reasonable shred of knowledge who would think that we have anything to do with what's going on over there. And yet we feel like we are targets too. And therefore, that's anti-Semitism. That's not anti-Zionism.
Rabbi, how can Arabs be anti-Semites?
Because theoretically they're anti-Semite, then they're just anti-Jew and not anti-Semites. Because Semite, theoretically, if you're an anti-Semite, theoretically, that could, even though anti-Semite has become synonymous with anti-Jew, I guess when you really parse out the word anti-Semite, that would mean you're anti-Jew and anti-Arab. And ironically, you're not anti-Jew in America. But of course, we know that you are. So I think anti-Semite is now you can't go with the precise definition of anti-Semite. I don't think anyone thinks an anti-Semite is a person who hates Arabs exclusively. Or yes.
In the voluminous opinions that are on CNN and elsewhere, I had heard one remark that struck me. And it was that Hamas is not a military or terrorist organization.
What are they, like a peace-loving
They are.
organization? They are, instead they are
They
what?
are Islamists and very avidly so. And that this to them is a religious war and they must wipe out, to your point, all Jews. And their focus is not just on Israel, but it's global. That kind of struck me because they do have this voracious aggression.
Yeah.
And it's almost beyond political. It is a religious Islamist organization. That's somebody else's opinion.
Well, it's an interesting one. I don't necessarily disagree. Just as a couple of thoughts, just to continue to equip you with some important things. Anytime that people talk about, which is now the latest in the news, is ceasefire, right? There should be a ceasefire. Allow me to tell you that there was a ceasefire on October 6th. And we didn't break that ceasefire. Just to be clear, right? It was like ceasefire. Well, why, we were following the ceasefire. Right? We were abiding by the ceasefire. And that merely, by the way, it's not like we had created, since the last-ish time that we established a ceasefire with Gaza, it's not like we had peace since then. We were just still functioning under the most recent ceasefire. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like every year there's, it feels like every year there's 1 or 2 times in which, I mean, obviously what happened on October 7th was worse than we've ever had. But every year there's some sort of rockets and missiles that happen, and then Israel retaliates, and then ceasefire, and then, all right, we stop. And so we've just been functioning under the most recent ceasefire. And they broke it again, which is not new. That's always the case. But yet again, they're calling for ceasefire. Why exactly do we agree to such a ceasefire when every time we've agreed to a ceasefire, they've broken that ceasefire? This is an every time thing, by the way. It's not like 60% of the times they break the ceasefire, 40% of the times we break the ceasefire. No, every single time they break the ceasefire. Now, again, I realize that anytime, a random person who is, let's just say, mentally ill shoots a rocket, then that everyone has the capacity to break the ceasefire, individually and for the whole region. But the point is that it's not like Israel's the one who shoots that first rocket ever. I think, never mind. I was just about to get snarky and I decided not to. Yes.
Just one thing that occurs to me though is that if Benjamin Netanyahu came out and stated that they would have a ceasefire for a limited period of time to allow Hamas to release the terrorists,
right,
and to allow aid to come in, and as long as Hamas respected that ceasefire, that we would also respect it, that wouldn't be a bad thing. Well, and maybe from that you could evolve into some kind of resolution to this without any further casualties or
yes and no. There's a huge part of me that agrees with you, a huge part of me that agrees with you. But I just feel then if we did that, then we would just be in the same place we are every time, which is just waiting for the next time that this happens.
But if they understood that if they violated the ceasefire at any point in time, the world would understand that it's on Hamas, and not on Israel, I hope.
My heart is with you on this, but I feel like that's, and I don't mean to, I feel like that it's like a scratched record. I feel like that's always what we say. And this time everyone will see that it's not Israel, but it's Hamas. And every single time it comes back to bite us. And again, I'm not like, but I'm with you. Every single time it happens, I'm so hopeful. And I feel like I'm just jaded right now because it's been how many times has what you're saying, and obviously there's wisdom in what you're saying because that's what we do every time, right? And so clearly people have agreed with you for generations. Well, generations is a strong word, but for a few decades, people have fully agreed with you about what you're saying, and I being one of them. And now yeah, sure, nothing would make me happier than, yes, it was a terrible, terrible blow to Israel, but this time I feel like the ceasefire will really hold.
And 25 years of appeasement has led us to an existential crisis in Israel.
I'm thinking of Israel's,
What's
of the hostages. I'm thinking of the hostages,
right, release the hostages.
And I'm thinking of Israel's reputation around the world.
Israel's reputation, the hostage is a good one, but a reputation.
No, but I think if Israel called for a ceasefire based on the release of the hostages and getting aid into Gaza, that it would deflect a lot of the criticism that Israel is getting. And if Hamas violated the ceasefire, it would be on Hamas.
I don't know. Don't you think that? I mean, under what circumstances? We were getting criticized. We were getting criticized on October 8th, without having gone into it. We were getting all Israel happened was 1,500 people killed and 200 people kidnapped, and Israel was being criticized before we had even retaliated. Because, you know, and the criticism was, because I see it, we had this coming to us, we deserve this, we should have gotten this.
Well, that's different.
Right,
Different-
right.
Different kind of criticism.
No, I know, but it's like, but
That's
I feel like that's the criticism that comes, like my daughter, like it's, if you really want to get, if you want to get dirty, right, ask your grandkids, you know, your kid / grandkid, and to ask if you can see their social media feed. Like, you can't ask me, I don't see it.
I'm getting stuff.
You're getting stuff, I don't see any of
don't even
it,
know
because
why.
because if I were ever to see someone put something nasty on social media, I would immediately just stop being friends with them. But my point is that, like, write their name down on a little notebook that I have. But my point is that my daughter, like, she's got her high school friends and whatever, and they are vicious and nasty. And I want to, like, if I help her.
To whom? To Jews?
To Jews.
Israel.
I have one of my daughter's best friends writes her an email, because my daughter has been putting on her Instagram, you know, positive, obviously, things about Israel. One of her friends sends her an email saying something to the effect, "I'm so disappointed in you." Right?
But
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'm getting stuff on my Facebook feed, it's just postings, not from anybody in particular.
Right.
Very, like.
You clearly, clicked somewhere,
But
and
I
then
don't.
now it's your algorithm.
I've never had any political, I don't click on any political stuff, I don't post any political stuff. And it's college campuses right now.
Yeah, I don't understand the concept of people that, and especially our children. I was going to ask about colleges, but that I didn't want to, but you went there, thank you. All oranges are fruit, not all fruit are oranges.
Right.
All Hamas are Palestinian, not all Palestinian are Hamas.
Correct.
Why is that not obvious? Terrorists are terrorists.
Why is that not obvious
to our budding
because they're not seen as
intelligentsia.
terrorists, they're referred to as freedom fighters.
Freedom fighters are allowed to go door to door and grab babies.
Yes.
I've seen people make that argument.
No, excuse me. They're not allowed, in my opinion.
No,
they are allowed in their
obviously,
opinion.
Rabbi.
Arthur,
I don't
I
get
have
it.
one question of this gentleman. Forget your name.
Bob.
Are there good guys and bad guys in this fight?
Yeah,
Who are the good guys?
the Israelis.
Thank you.
I don't know.
I think what he was trying to figure out, but again, Bob's thoughts I agree with, and I have agreed with every single time along the way. I'm a little bit different this time, only because I feel like, you know, you storm Israel's borders like that, you kidnap all these people, you behead and rape, like this touches the Jew at a way, way deeper kind of place than the classic rockets that come over, and and the stone throwing and the tire burnings, because this is pogroms. I mean, this is what it is, a pogrom. And so so therefore that is why it touches us at a different place. And the thing about it is, and I need to remember this and write this down, because I'm now coming up with an interesting idea. But we have been part of the Jewish mantra, not just, never again, never again. Of course, everyone knows that. But part of the Jewish mantra, I think, has been, how did we not fight back more? How did we just allow, Bialik talks about, just being like, sheep to the slaughterhouse.
When are you talking about? When did we not?
Germany?
There was no resistance.
Germany.
No resistance.
Right.
That
And it's
Bialik, that was really like late 19th, early 20th century, late 19th century with the Kishinev pogrom.
Right.
And that was, that's something everybody should know about.
Right, but that's what I'm saying by mantra is we as modern Jews, we look back and by the way, Israel more than any. If you want to talk about a country, like Israel has a very interesting relationship with the Holocaust. Of course, obviously they embrace and love and cherish anyone who went through the Holocaust and are pained by it. But Israel is, to some degree, you don't hear about the Holocaust as much in Israel as you do in America. And that's because Israel tries to kind of push it down because they're not in that place anymore. Like Israel will not let someone do that to them again. And so as a result, part of this modern day Jewish mantra has been, you're not going to see this happen again. Like we are going to defend ourselves.
We're not victims.
Right. And so therefore, I think part of what's going on in Israel right now is that the echo of that thought and feeling is rising to the surface because they're just not, I think they are going to show strongly that we will not let this happen to us without people feeling that. I see you waving at me, Paul. Okay, go.
Well, what's going on with the Arabs is called jihad. And jihad is a religious war in which God is on the side of those doing the jihad. And we have it also in Christianity where they sing on Sunday, "Onward, Christian soldiers marching as to war with the cross of Jesus." So these two religions are militant. And when God is on your side, you can't lose.
Right. Well, I do want everyone to know, and Jim, 1 second. I do want everyone to know that at the Jewish, if you were to come up with a slogan for Israel, if I were to come up with a slogan for Israel, it would be like, Israel, visit us if you want, otherwise just leave us alone.
Don't step on the snake.
Right, that's right. Don't step on the snake, but visit, we'd love for you to visit. But if you don't want to visit, fine. Otherwise, then leave us alone. Just you stay there and we'll stay in our little matchbox in this huge, football field of Arab countries and just leave us alone. And that's what we want. We're not interested in going out and conquering, right? We're not interested in like, I assure you that there are some people that feel as if the West Bank is Jewish and ours and given back to us by God. But for the most part, I mean, Israel just take the West Bank, just leave us alone. I mean, and so this notion that there is like some sort of, that we are this aggressor is just, for me, how many years have I experienced Israel just wanting people to just be left alone? It's like being called the aggressor is just such an utter misstatement. Jim, what were you about to say?
To the question of why didn't Jews resist, I think the experience is that civilian populations can never resist an armed force. Correct. Or an army. That's why the existence of Israel is a very significant factor, and some things in the Second World War would have turned out differently had there been a Jewish state.
I agree with you.
But like in Kishinev, it's just impossible anywhere.
Oh, no. I'm not saying that. First of all, Kishinev, like, it wasn't like an army. It was, but regardless, I'm not saying it's impossible for me to kind of say right or wrong back then. Wasn't there. I don't know the circumstances. I don't know to what degree, things, it's impossible to know for me really what it was like. But what I do know is that modern Israel looks back on those experiences and says, similar to kind of what you're saying, now we have a country and an army of our own, that type of behavior is not part of our DNA any longer. I think that's so, but I'm not. Yeah. So it's really less about what they did back then and more about how Israel has felt about what happened back then. And so I think that, and that's why I feel like for us to go to, you know, for us to not respond to this type of, I mean, really, like, we wouldn't have asked, it was our expectation that America would do it after 9/11. Our expectation. Can you imagine if after 9/11, America just said, well, you know, if we were to go into Iraq or whatever, it would be disproportionate. We're just gonna, who knows, we might actually accidentally, you know, bomb a school, an accident, you know, or, you know, maybe there'll be a misfire by the Taliban and they will shoot their own hospital, but, you know, but since they'll be the underdog in all this, it'll be our fault. And so we're just going to sit back and just accept the fact that 2 Twin Towers went down and the Pentagon was hit. Like, we would be like, what are you, crazy? You go in there and you carpet bomb that place. And yet, for some reason, not exactly the same with Israel. When, by the way, that the pain, destruction, devastation, again, I don't want to say pain because that's impossible, but the actual casualties, the deaths of what happened on October 7th, 10 times as bad as 9/11. I don't want to compare pain, and I don't want to compare the totality of what it's meant, because now it's impossible to compare what these two things are. Like, how can you compare destroying the World Trade Centers and commerce? It's impossible to compare, and I do not want to. And I hate making that comparison. But what I am saying is, in terms of actual deaths, 10 times as many.
Can I add a parenthetical?
Yeah, and then Tom after. And then Eric wants to talk also.
And
So
Dave.
Arthur, what's that? Who else?
Dave also.
Okay, so Dave wants to his hand? Okay,
Yes.
fine.
Parenthetical, take 1 second. Israel gave warning to northern Gaza to get out of northern Gaza 3 weeks ago.
That's right. Tom.
And for that hospital, I mean, that's the kind of collateral you were talking about. That was such an issue when it seemed that everyone assumed that the Israelis must have bombed it. As soon as it became clear that Islamic Jihad did it, it disappeared from the news. You never hear one word about that hospital.
Right. Like, it's a terrible thing. Never. Eric, all right, fine. Dave, you want to talk? Then Eric.
Okay. I don't know if you all remember, but after 9/11, there were videos of the Palestinians celebrating, passing out candy, celebrating the death of the Americans after 9/11. These are the same Palestinians that are killing Jews in Israel. As far as I'm concerned, they should bomb the shit out of them once and for all, and get rid of them all. I don't think there's a good one there. They all supported the killing of Americans as well as supporting the killing of Jews. They were the ones that elected the regime in Gaza.
Right.
They don't deserve any sympathy from us.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, that's a pretty strong statement. And obviously, by the way, you're speaking metaphorically, because we know that those people who allegedly were celebrating after 9/11 are certainly not the same people who are in the West Bank or in Gaza. But what you are saying, and which I don't necessarily disagree with, is that Hamas has a great deal of support, that they're not alone. You know, that it's not like the case of just some random kind of bullies who really are kind of taking the reins of an area who do not support them. But at the same time, I also think that the quote election, there's a lot of fear that goes into who you vote for. Now, I think that after so many years and decades even, that Hamas has sufficiently instilled a lot of hate thoughts into its population. And so people who may have otherwise been against Hamas in the past are now kind of with them. But look, I'd like to think that there are innocent people there, and I believe there to be innocent people there. But that said, we have almost 2,000 innocent deaths, in Israel, and 200 innocent kidnappees, hostages, and so, I mean, there's, all I know is that I'm just not, if we did a ceasefire, as much as, if I felt like it was legit, if it was sustainable, or at least mostly sustainable, like, sure, there might be some crazy person out there who breaks it, but if Hamas was really disabled and legitimately was saying maybe, and Abu Mazen had strength and could kind of go in there and run all of Gaza in addition to the West Bank, you know, maybe, and we got all our hostages back. I mean, there's a lot of maybes, but then maybe I would say, all right, maybe this is a little different and let's give it a try. Like I'm like, I want this to be over, but I also just want us to not feel like this could happen again to us.
I just want to say one thing about no resistance in the Holocaust. There was resistance in the Warsaw Ghetto.
Right.
And that's documented.
Of course.
They got weapons and they really went to town on the Germans.
Right. Again, no, I agree. But I think that the totality of the experience, not just of the Holocaust, but even prior, is of us really just kind of not being able to, not feeling, and even, look, even in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, we did resist, but in the end, we were annihilated anyway. And so there is a sense that we're hopeless.
The survivors have a kibbutz
in Lochamei Getaot in northern Israel. I know about it, but unfortunately, they are in the crossfires of Hezbollah. Nick, go ahead. Then Eric's after you.
On the 20s and 30s, I think what occurred was the frog in the pot of boiling water. It started slow, small, and that's how every regime is they start, oh, we're just going to do this.
Right.
Oh, and then this.
Registration.
And then, so, I mean, if you take a frog, drop it in a pot of boiling water, he's going to jump right out. If you set him in a pot of tepid water, turn the stove on, it'll gradually heat up, he'll die because he doesn't realize it's getting too hot.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's what occurred. But obviously people did have their breaking point because we saw in some of the ghettos uprisings.
Right.
The attitude was, if we just fit in, everything will be fine.
Don't make any trouble.
Don't make any trouble. That's right. Right, it's the famous joke about the two guys who were at the firing squad, you know, they're about to be executed. And they say, you know, do you have any last words? And and one guy says, yeah, I got some last words for you. You are nasty, awful son of a bitch. How dare you think you have the right to execute me after everything you do? I did nothing wrong. And then the second guy says to the first, shh, don't make any trouble. Don't make any trouble. Eric, you're the last. This better be good, Eric. You're the last.
Yeah, some facts regarding the Hamas 2005 or 2005 election. I just read that they only garnered 41% of the vote. Fatah got 42%, Fatah got 41%. The way it was weighted, Hamas ended up with 68% of the seats in the legislature. That sounds familiar. The whole system was gerrymandered to produce that result. Number two, Rabbi, we didn't go into Iraq after 9/11. We went into Afghanistan. And how did that turn out? Number three, Dave, I see you right there. I agree with you. I think I didn't agree with Lauren. All of these Palestinians that are staying in Gaza City, in my mind, they are enemy combatants. Don't tell me, to me, they're just like the Germans who were up there swinging Heil Hitler at the very beginning until the end. You're a combatant. You could have left. You could have said, I want another election. You could have revolted, which somebody said that's hard to do. It has happened. It certainly happened in America. It happened in Russia in 1917. It is doable. And the last thing I want to say is, if there's one thing that this illustrates, is that nobody is going to come to our rescue.
That's for sure.
We are on our own. And here in America, Temple Beth Shalom, I would volunteer to do this and people poo-pooed it. Why do we not have member of the men's club and the women's club, to be politically correct, to be standing outside, armed if necessary, to make sure that nobody comes into our services? Why are we not protecting ourselves and relying upon an Anne Arundel County police officer who's off duty, or maybe two?
So we have 2 officers armed, and just because they're off duty doesn't mean that they're not.
I don't trust. I'm finished trusting police. I've seen police. I want to take care of myself, and that's my statement.
Fair enough, but
I agree with you.
But I think, just to make sure, Dave, were you saying that you wanted to just wipe all of the people in Gaza City, or were you including the people who left Gaza City and went to the south in your statement?
All of them.
Well, I don't agree with that part.
I was making sure, Eric, you knew what you were agreeing with when you said I 100% agree with Dave.
I 50% agree with Dave.
Thought that would be a fun way to end our little discussion. Is to have Eric on record saying that he was in favor of a full-blown carpet bomb from the border of Egypt.
And I'll mention one other thing. Is after we have carpet bombed and gotten rid of Gaza City, we ought to send Trump in to build it up and make it into a great resort.
Make Gaza great again.
You know what? I think it's a great idea.
Make Gaza great again.
That's right. And while we're at it, I guess all of the mass murderers in Gaza it's really all an issue of mental illness. And it has nothing to do with the fact that they have access to all these rockets and guns.
Bullshit.
No, it's mental illness.
Eric is
That's what we should be addressing, is mental illness.
Eric is saying he wants our ushers to be armed.
Eric is
go outside.
And I'd like to list the people who I least want to be armed the most at the temple. Let's get to our text. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu v'asok b'divrei Torah. By the way, in case anyone is like, wait, I never got a chance to talk, something tells me we're going to be talking about this again next week too. Okay.
Amen.
About the next week 2 part or the blessing?
Yeah, the blessing.
Yes.
Let's see. So I just want to make sure before I continue.
46.
No, I know. Just to put this out there for all to know, there is class next week. There will not be class the following week. So just to put those in dates for you. We do have class on the 6th of November. We do not have class on the 13th of November. Okay, thank you. My mommy and my daddy are being honored for some sort of fundraiser, is what it is. And I have to go fly down for their fundraiser. Right? They're not fundraising for my parents. It's not like a GoFundMe page. It's they're being honored for another institution. I have to go down and fly down for that. Anyway, Mom and Dad, if you're watching it, you deserve it. This class, you deserve the honor. And
You're a good son.
That's right. All right. So, chapter 46, verse 1. That's where I think we are. Yep. And we left off with, obviously we know Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, and then Joseph had a relatively heartwarming kind of connection with each other, and Joseph sends his brothers back home to go bring the family down, and Jacob hears the news that Joseph is alive, and Jacob says, "What are we waiting for?" Kind of reminds me of you ever see, Rocky, when I don't know, something happens and Rocky Balboa gets inspired to like really work hard.
That was Rocky 2.
And then, right, fine, and Burgess Meredith in the background, what are we waiting for? So Burgess Meredith, what a great character that guy was. Anyway, who's Jewish, he wore the yarmulke, the whole movie he's got a yarmulke on. Oh my God.
What verse are we on, please?
I was talking about scene 3 of Rocky 2. All right, we're on verse 1, chapter 46. I do want to just point out, which is kind of an interesting thing, which oftentimes largely goes unmentioned, but Joseph has already started the brothers, and they are so surprised, and Joseph says, "Oh, don't worry, brothers, because I know that this all seems really bad, but God had a big plan for me to be here and save you from this famine." And you do have to wonder theologically. So God's plan, let's just make sure we have the plan correct. God's plan is, let's create this enormous famine in the region, have the entire area suffer, but have this one guy go down so he can bring his family to Egypt. Why didn't, if God's plan was to save Jacob and the family, why didn't God just not make the famine? We don't know why, or maybe we do know why. And the reason is because, as I have said on multiple thousand times, that the book of Genesis has some elements, when I say some, a handful of elements of historicity to it. For the most part, it's legends and stories. And again, our legends and our stories, which make them beautifully and critically important, but not as a source of history, but rather as a source of beauty and enrichment. One second. However, our Jewish story begins in Egypt with Exodus. And our birth narrative has to be that we are a people that we're a people who are slaves in Egypt and who are redeemed and liberated by God from Egypt. And we get the Torah, and we go to Canaan, and we are now a people who are in Canaan with the Torah and with our traditions, and that's our story. And so, I joke about, why is it that our story is about how God, sent Joseph ahead to save his family and bring them to Egypt? Why didn't God just not create the famine? And the simple answer is because it's not about famine or saving or freedom or any of that. It's just about, how did we become a people who were in Egypt to begin with? And that is why this, so if you are theologically troubled by an entire region of the planet who might be dying of starvation because of a famine, that God has had the capacity not to do. Instead, God choosing only to save this one family and bring them to Egypt. And if that is theologically troubling to you, I get it. And all I can say is, I don't really think that that's what happened, right? I really think that it's just written about to explain why we're in Egypt. And it's just kind of like and it does further God's power, or our communication of why God would do such a thing, is in order to make sure that we know that we are God's chosen people. Arthur.
You know my reaction.
Yeah.
So I respectfully disagree. So the Torah and the story of the Jewish people is not there frivolously. It's not there because it's simply a story or a legend or something to entertain you. It's there because God has a reason and a purpose in what he does. And it's the same answer that I would give about Abraham. God could simply have said to Jewish people. I'm going to create a Jewish people. I'm going to give you a leader. His name is going to be Abraham. And poof, there it is. But he subjected Abraham to 10 tests. A, to strengthen Abraham, but most importantly, to demonstrate to other people about the existence of God. And so through all these trials that Abraham would survive, people would get the message, there is a God and there is hope for the future.
And there is a purpose,
And there
by
is
the
a-
way, to why God was doing it to Abraham, because God wanted to strengthen people's resolve, strengthen Abraham's resolve, and move forward.
There's a method to the madness.
What's the method to the madness about famine for the region? And saving just one family?
It's part of the narrative about the emergence of the Jewish people and ultimately the Jewish people going to Sinai and receiving the Torah and getting the message through the plagues that God is in charge of nature, nature is not in charge of God.
I agree with you, but what I'm saying is,
But the famine and the enslavement all led up to the liberation and to the plagues and ultimately.
I'm saying the same thing. I'm saying that
Sinai.
our story starts in Egypt, and I'm saying no, and I'm all that I'm agreeing with. I'm saying that the Jewish story, at its core, if you ask someone, tell me about the origins of Judaism, okay? If a person were to say, well, there was Abraham, that I think they would be wrong. I think if someone were to ask the question, what are the origins of Judaism? I think the correct answer is we were slaves, we were redeemed, we got the Torah, and went to Canaan. And our story is not, well, Joseph was this Brazier and he brought his family, and God, because of Joseph, and God made it so the family came down to Egypt. Because again, I just think that is, again, the conversation is not, I don't want to talk about historicity from Exodus forward, because again, obviously some things are historical, some things, in my opinion, aren't. But what I'm saying is Genesis, purely Genesis, separate from the rest of the Torah. I think Genesis is a way to get us to Egypt. And that's it. I don't think it's about Abraham's. I think the stories are worthy and valuable about Abraham, and I do think that they're meaningful. As I said, I cherish these stories. I just think that it's all just the authors saying, how do we get us to Exodus so we can get to our story, which is slave, redeem, Torah, Canaan. Karen, Arthur?
What you're saying is not, I think it's a legitimate thing to argue on your behalf, but I think there are other legitimate ways of looking at it.
I would just have, my problem is theologically, why God would let a region suffer and die, I presume, through famine, when if just for the purposes of just what's showing the brothers that God was in control of all this. It just seems a little harsh and a little arbitrary for God to punish everybody. If God was saying, and I'm going to put famine on Sodom and Gomorrah, I'd be like, all right, I get it. Theologically, I get it. They're evil, they deserve it. But the whole region we're not saying is evil.
But the Torah doesn't pretend to be internally consistent or rational or logical. The only thing the Torah wants you to do is to do the mitzvahs.
Right.
The rest of it is you pay your money, you take your pick.
Right. It's funny. Right. I just like to think though that God is not random, and God we care, and God is good, and God wouldn't do that. That's just kind of, I guess, where I'm going with Karen, Jim, Karen first, Barbara. Okay, I'm glad I brought it up. It's very positive.
Okay, well, about your point about the theological issue, if it were only one family, but the fact is that it wasn't only one family that benefited from Joseph being there. Now, Joseph presented it to his brothers as, hey, don't worry about what your role in this, because I was here for a purpose, and you, by the way, coincidentally are going to get saved with, fed and all. But the fact is that Joseph was put in place, and because he was put in place, a lot of people didn't starve, because he put in systems for storing the grain, blobby, and distributing. So a lot of folks were a lot better off, not just his family.
That's true. But again, if that's God's intent, was for Joseph to save all these people by having, I mean, it's
We know
my
Joseph's
theological,
ego.
right, it's my theological trouble with this story, but that's a good point, and I thank you for that. Wait, Kathy, go ahead.
Okay, I think that the Jacobs family was flawed in several major ways.
Right.
And one of the ways that is really critical, I think, to this whole story is that there was no true leader. Even Joseph was not a true leader.
Well, Jacob was the leader of his family.
No, I don't mean that kind of a leader. I mean the kind of leader who could. No one was a Moses.
Right.
In that family, and
Right.
they were flawed in that way. And
but Moses was flawed. That's kind of one of the things, extraordinary things about the Torah, which I think people point to with regularity, is just how flawed all of the characters of the Torah are.
But Moses had something that nobody in Jacob's family had, and that was certain leadership qualities that nobody else had, even Joseph.
Right. That's true.
And maybe it was God's intention to send all of them to Egypt so that a real leader could emerge, because not one of them was a leader in an important way.
Maybe it's an interesting idea. Yeah. Go ahead.
I have a whole different take.
Okay.
In that, in many cases in the Torah, it says God did this, God did that. In this one, it doesn't say that. Joseph, who...
That's correct. Joseph is the one who claims that it's God who does everything.
And he had all these visions and dreams, and so now he has to prove that his dreams are coming true for his own sake, that I am a seer, whether he is or isn't. So he's saying, God told me this, God told me that.
But he's lying.
He's just putting himself up and not say, and so
it's a pretty amazing, if you're right, by the way, which I'm not disputing.
That negates what you're saying, that God.
Yeah, but I was just about to say that it's pretty impressive that he was able to predict 7 years of famine and 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine.
Oh, yeah. Well, people
get lucky. Every once in a while you hit the...
People are saying about climate change.
Right.
And, people hadn't believed them. So are these seers? Who knows? But he's now saying, I am more important, and this is the proof that I'm more important. And God told me it wasn't me, it was God. And he said this to the Pharaoh too.
Right. I mean, actually, the truth of the matter is, it's like saccharine sweet humility, in which Joseph is like, oh, it's not me, it's God every time, but even that, people know that the moment you say, oh, it's because I have this special connection with God, you just it's the as the sports metaphor, which some of you might be thrown up by, but I just love my sports metaphors. How many times have I seen interviews after a game in which this sharp shooting basketball player hits 50 points in a game or whatever, and gets on interview afterwards. I remember my favorite one, because I just throw the ball up and Jesus puts the ball in the hoop. Right? It's like, the point is it's as if to say, like, what's more impressive, how good you are, or that you have some sort of special connection with Jesus that helps you get the basket? Though you don't do it, Jesus is on your side. Like, either way, it's not humble. There's nothing humble about it. Wait, Paul, go ahead.
Okay, so I want to emphasize, we use the word story. It's a story, but it has a purpose.
Yeah, of course.
And that comes from the Greek word mythos, a story with a purpose. And the purpose was wonderful. Number one, it gave monotheism to a world that was polytheistic. It gave them the 10 Commandments, which is a plan for how to behave yourself.
Yep.
This was unique. And that's what the purpose was.
Yeah, I agree. I'm fully agreeing with you. I'm saying that I think that that our story starts all along my original point. Our story starts in Egypt. It's always been that way. That's who we are. Jews, the Passover Seder doesn't, I mean, well, I guess it does talk about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but the point is that it's the story, Passover Seder really is about our liberation, not about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Go ahead, Jim.
I believe that the very improbability of the events that are described is some evidence for their historicity, and so that people, so some of the things are interpretations of how things happen. But the fact that Jews became monotheists as a result of Sinai is that they saw extraordinary set of miracles which saved them at a time of great catastrophe in the land. And then, going back, I mean, there are some ways possibly of testing this. For example, are there evidence in Egyptian Middle Kingdom records of Semitic people on reliefs who were there in the Middle Kingdom? That's the second phase. So the very improbability of, why was Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed? I would suggest that's something that happened, and it was a memory, and then it was passed on, and then attributed to the sinfulness of those.
Correct.
people.
I agree with you 100%. I agree. I think that, right, various different things happened, and then were retrofitted with an explanation.
Yes.
Arthur.
There just to kind of agree with you, there is a school of thinking in the Orthodox community that the real Rosh Hashanah does not take place in September, October, but in the first month of the Jewish calendar year, which is Pesach.
Correct.
So they're really kind of corroborating the essence of what you're saying.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I don't think any I don't think any Jewish academic or not even scholar, just like person who has at least studied this to some degree, thinks that Judaism starts anywhere else than Egypt, because that is who we are. I mean, really, it is who we are. I just think that, but I think that there could very well have been, I mean, some sort of measure of these stories that served as the kernel for why we have the various different myths or stories or acts or happenings of Genesis. So I'm not throwing out Genesis entirely as a myth. Look, I mean, for that matter, like Noah's Ark. I mean, do we really believe that there was an ark with just two animals of every species on that ark? It's a little implausible, but there probably was some sort of something. I mean, the Epic of Gilgamesh also talks about it. So there's probably something that speaks to that story, which enabled that to be.
Is it more implausible than the notion of God himself or herself? Is the story of Noah's Ark more implausible than the notion of God?
It is more implausible than the notion of God. To me, but yeah.
It simply kicks back to the fact that God said there will be a great flood. So there is God in there, whether it's Judaism or not. And then he said, I'm going to wipe out everything on the earth that is living. This is pretty graphically, but if you want to believe in the fact that God existed prior to that, this was supposed to be the hand of God that generated the Noah epic.
Right. Yeah. Eric, go ahead, and then we'll move on.
I'll make this very short, rather. Rabbi, were you taught that in rabbinical school? Was that a conclusion that you reached yourself?
The answer is, I'm not sure. What I mean by that is, I think it's a conclusion that I reached myself. However, it's possible I may have been taught it and I wasn't paying attention. No, it's not something that I can totally imagine them teaching that to me, but oftentimes we were just stuck in all this ridiculous esoterica that they didn't actually get to some good stuff. So I'm not sure, but but let me say it this way. If I were to have that conversation if I were in a room of 100 rabbis who, let's say, went to my rabbinical school, I would be shocked if anyone were to disagree with me. Now, doesn't mean we could be, it could be all wrong, like that story of Yehoshua, Rabbi Eliezer with the oven of Achnai, and it's like just Rabbi Eliezer and everyone else disagreeing with him except for God. But my point is that I think this is I think I'm not, this is not something which I'm like floating out to you as maybe I'm, this is an interesting idea. Like, I don't know, I think I feel relatively confident about this, but I am appreciative of the various different, insights that come along with it, to be sure. And again, I say reform, not, I certainly wouldn't say, like if I was in a room full of Orthodox rabbis and I said, yeah, I just want you to know that, let's be real, none of Genesis happened, except as myth kernels. And really our story, and really the story of the Jewish experience starts as slaves in Egypt. I think they would all say, well, no, right?
I'm puzzled. So are you saying that the Torah is not only essentially, but really substantially about the history of the Jewish people? And that really the wisdom of the Torah and the mitzvahs of the Torah are neither here nor there. Is that what you're saying?
To some degree, I don't want to say fully. I think that yes, I think the Torah was written with a purpose. It was to document our people's travel.
Wisdom is just incidental. The Torah is just, the mitzvahs are just sort of incidental.
Well, when you put it that way in terms of incidental, it does seem a little negative. Now that said, I believe that they were, well, yes, fine, I'll go there, incidental. But I think that they were part of, that doesn't mean that they're not meaningful and important for us, but I think that the purpose was to get us, was to say, this is who we are as a people. And this is our guidebook that helps us get there as a people. And we are, and these were the values that come along with it, but it wasn't and so I do understand. And so when I say incidental, I'm talking about incidental to the way that I read the Torah, but I'm not saying incidental in terms of the way that the Jewish people experience the Torah. So it's a yes and a no, because it has to do with, are we talking about the Torah as I read it right now and why I think it was put in place? Yes, I think incidental, but at the same time, are we talking about how our tradition over the last 3,000 years have kind of embraced the Torah and carried the Torah with us as part of the fabric of Judaism? No, then the mitzvot are not incidental, not even close to incidental. So it's really just kind of depends on how I approach what we're talking about. Yes, Paul.
I just wanted to announce that in the spring semester at the community college, I'm giving a course on the Exodus.
Yes, sir.
Has that started?
When we're dealing
Spring
with,
semester.
when Arthur and you,
We're not
Rabbi,
even
are
to the
dealing
winter yet.
with the
Okay.
mitzvot, are you talking about all the 600 some mitzvot?
That's what he is talking about, yes.
Well, I'll settle for the 10 Commandments. Let's go with that.
Okay.
So the other thing is that Genesis, God is interacting with individuals. But
Yes.
in Exodus, it's the collective.
Well, Moses and then the collective.
But God is interacting on behalf
Yeah, right.
of the Jewish people.
That's correct.
As a whole.
That's correct,
And
yes.
it gives us collective identity.
Yes,
That's what you're saying.
yes, yes,
Right?
yes, 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 yes. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
And thank you for saying it that way. But again, the question about how I feel about the mitzvot as part of the Torah, it really depends on what we're talking about. But Arthur, I'm understanding what you're saying also. By the way, Greg Walker, I don't see you there. It's okay, you don't have to put your video on, but I just want you to know good news that you left and came back, and we still haven't gotten to the first verse yet. So we're just still working on a recap right now. You missed nothing in the 20-minute trap. Now you're home.
I am here, and my main concern is that we honor the guidance we were given in the chapter at the end where it says, do not be quarrelsome on the way.
Well said. Well said. All right, so we have 10 minutes to go, so let's at least get to a little bit of text. So Israel set out with all that was his, and he came to Beersheba, where he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. It's kind of interesting, by the way. It certainly is true, God of his father Isaac. However, it's kind of interesting that typically you don't hear that expression like God of Isaac, right? Maybe you hear God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or you'll hear God of Abraham, but God of Isaac is, I think, the only time in the Torah. And part of it is because Isaac, as we have discussed in the past, is kind of all the characters that we meet in the book of Genesis, kind of, how do I put it? Weak, right? It's or I don't want to say irrelevant, because certainly not irrelevant, but things just happen to him and he doesn't do anything. It's all, he is the indirect object, or the direct object, not the subject of our stories. But so it is just kind of interesting that they reference Isaac here. Where is he? So he sets out with all that was his, and he came to Beersheba. He went from, I think Jacob was at the time living in Hebron, and went from Hebron, which is here, down to Beersheba, which is here. Just pointing it out to you. And when he got to, God called to Israel in a vision by night, Jacob. Jacob, he answered, here. And he said, I am God, the God of your father. Fear not to go down to Egypt, for I will make you there into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I myself will also bring you back, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. Wow, a lot there, right? A lot there. So let's start with fear not. Why would Jacob be afraid to go to Egypt? Well, there's lots of reasons, right? Long journey, you're old, it is Egypt, right? He already, there might be some sort of, even if he now knows Joseph is down there, I think that it would be fair for Jacob to still not fully know what to make of Joseph. How is it that this guy could legitimately be for lack of a better word, vice president of Egypt, and never once checked in to see how his dad was, right? So Jacob is maybe a little nervous about that. Any other reason why Jacob might be nervous to go down to Egypt? Yeah.
People are afraid of change.
Good point. People are afraid of change. Yeah.
And he's old, and it's a long journey, and not easy.
He's old, it's a long journey. Yep.
Only that, he hears someone calling out to him, hey, I need you to go there.
Right, well, that's probably, of all the things, that's the least part that might be giving him worry, just because he's had that before. But you're right. Although I probably assume, how many times has he had talks with God, right? And so it's happened before, but doesn't mean it's happened a lot. And so therefore, I would say that maybe to some degree, anytime you're just like, because it could have been decades since the last time or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're walking and you hear God's voice, and you're like,
what now?
What now? Right, what now?
So, Rabbi, is this translation with the here? Because I thought the same thing about taking attendance. Here, Jacob.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's Paul will be happy to, kind of. It's more than that, though. It means here I am and ready.
I'm here and ready to obey.
Ready to obey.
Is that Hineni?
Yep, Hineni.
Yeah, Hineni.
But you can look, by the way. So second to last line, second word from the right.
That's what I read.
Well, isn't he also worried about leaving the land that God gave him and going to a land that God didn't give them?
Yes. And that would be for good reason too.
But he said, and I myself will bring you back. So he's going back. And then Joseph is going to close his eyes. In other words, you're going to be dead, and Joseph
Well,
will be
that's
there at the
interesting,
end of
right?
this.
It says, and I'll bring you back, right? Is that, do you think he's
Is
saying?
Joseph coming back?
I'm actually want to look at the Hebrew really quickly to see if it's in the singular. Singular. I'll bring you, Jacob, back here. Obviously, does that mean literally Jacob, or maybe that's just talking about his household, his descendants? And then Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. That's definitely a metaphor for Joseph will be there when you die. Yeah.
Yeah. But it doesn't say where you're going to die.
Correct,
That Joseph
correct.
will be
And
with
it does,
you.
and God doesn't say, I sent Joseph ahead to prepare the way. So that goes back to my prior. So I don't believe that God told Joseph.
The interesting is that I do want to. There is another reason why Jacob would be afraid. And does anyone who's got a book, who's using a book, not using my text? Anybody? You got. So go to chapter 26, verse 2. Genesis 26, verse 2.
26?
Yeah. I just need one person to do it. You'll read aloud for everybody.
Okay.
Karen, you want to read for us?
I'm still looking for verse 2. And
no problem. Chapter 26, verse 2. This is.
Well, I'm just reading from the text.
Oh, you still have it there? All right, go ahead. So, no, Karen, you're off the hook. Kathy, go ahead. This is God talking to Isaac.
Wait a second. Oh, the Lord had appeared to him.
Isaac. Isaac, yeah.
Okay. And said, do not go down to Egypt. Stay in the land which I point out to you. Reside in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. I will assign all these lands to you and to your heirs, fulfilling the oath that I swore to your father Abraham.
That's probably good enough. The point is that I think you're getting the point, whereas when, with respect, family lore was passed down, I have to at least think, and Jacob knows that Isaac was forbidden from going to Egypt. And now suddenly, Joseph says to Jacob, come on down, right? And then God appears to Jacob. And at that moment, for good reason, Jacob is probably like, oh, I didn't get permission to come down, did I? Forgot about that. Everything was so happy to see my son Joseph. And now suddenly I forgot that God has forbidden us from going to Egypt. But what does God say? Don't worry, fear not to go down to Egypt, for I will make you there into a great nation. Right? So I think that the Torah didn't want to leave us kind of wondering if it was okay for him to go down or not, that he's got the official seal of God's approval for going down.
Why did God change his mind about that?
Well, according to Joseph, it would be, because God wanted to save the family. According to me, it would be because God realized that we need to be slaves in Egypt. And so therefore, we need to manage to get to Egypt, and so we can be redeemed and then become the Jewish people.
But do so with the story.
What's that?
God changed his mind.
Yeah, God's allowed to change God's mind. Happens more than once. If you want to know, take a look at the story of Balak, Bilam, the talking donkey, and you will see the perfect example of God changing God's mind. Yes, Arthur, and then Karen.
No, I'm still stuck. Okay. So we now are given to understand that the Torah is just really the story about the birth of the Jewish people. And that the authors, who were presumably mortal men, women, wrote this book. So, but if that's true.
My opinion.
No, I'm beyond that already.
Okay.
If that's true and they were somewhat rational and intelligent, let's give them the benefit of that doubt. Why would the story be so confounding and irrational? Why would there need to be famine if the story was written by men?
Because to me, it's because we needed a reason to get us to Egypt.
Well, but it's also that famines were common. Famines occur. And floods occur
Yeah.
between the Tigris and the
But
Euphrates.
why is that important to the Jewish story about the birth of the Jewish people?
Because it adds to the history.
But it's not. But it's not important. The actual famine is. It could have been. It could have been God sent a sandstorm through Hebron, which forced Jacob to get up and walk further down south. It could have been, Jacob heard a voice from God saying, "I changed my mind, go to Egypt." Like whatever it is, the authors made a decision that we needed to get to Egypt. That's just again, I can't explain.
The authors are not good writers. No.
I was gonna say, plot holes exist in books.
Yeah, that's true. But again, why? I don't see this as necessarily a plot hole. Why? I'm not. I'm just like,
Okay.
it's just that's the plot they chose to go with. It was mildly plausible. It was part of the story of Joseph rising to power. It explained how Joseph could get to reach that.
So why did the writers give us Genesis to begin with in the story of Adam and Eve?
Okay, that's a good question, and I don't know why couldn't the Torah just have started with Exodus and by the way, I think you probably know this. There's a midrash which talks about that. Why did the Torah start with Genesis? Why didn't it start? Actually, what the midrash says, why didn't the Torah start with the giving of the Ten Commandments?
Because the people saw the sun, they saw the sky, and somebody had to create this.
I'm not fine, but I'm agreeing that it answered some questions about that. But what I'm saying is, in really one of the most famous midrashim that we have, I don't know who. I'll look into it. And I really will find this because it's famous. This won't be hard for me to find. Why did the Torah start with the book of Genesis? And they come up with the answer, well, because it starts with the letter bad, and just like it's this way, you're probably not even saying it, you probably remember, you can't see what's above or below or only forward this way. And then, but they asking that, the very fact that they're asking the question why it starts there and why the Torah doesn't start at the Ten Commandments is almost to me like a recognition by these rabbis, like this is kind of where the Torah should have started.
What about Noah's Ark? I mean, where does that fit into anything?
Because again, where did that? It doesn't like the best that they come up. Whoa, these are the Noahide laws. Like
No, but if it was written by men who were rational and basically pretty good writers, why would they give us that story?
Right, because these are part of like the stories that were out there. Like I really,
these are just random stories.
I think Noah's Ark, yes. I think that Adam and Eve, yes. I think that the story of Abraham and the various different stories of Abraham, all right, I think that is, there was a kernel of Jewish tradition that kind of was surrounding that story, which kind of enabled it to be part of the Torah. I think Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all those have become uniquely kind of Jewish. I think everything that happened before would probably, although I don't know if there are Tower of Babel stories in other texts, I certainly know that there are towers in, what are they called? Ziggurats. That's the word. Thank you. Ziggurats. But, I mean, in Noah's Ark again is in Gilgamesh. There's a lot of these stories have their corollary parallel stories in other places. I don't know to what degree that from Abraham forward that they may kind of occupy various different kind of kernels from our kind of family lore. But
you understand why I'm struggling with your...
Not exactly.
Because it sounds to me like the parts of the Torah that hang together as a rational story written by men, we embrace. The parts that don't quite fit into that, we sort of say, we don't know, or it's a random story.
I don't think, I mean,
I kind of
the rational, like
both ways.
The reason why I would disagree, the reason why I now get it, because there's tons of stuff which is irrational that follows from Exodus forward. But what I'm saying is it's just part of this a part of what I consider to be the Jewish narrative, which is, where did we come from? What happened to make us like, what is our unique story? What happened?
If I picked up a book like this as a novel, I would probably put it down after the first chapter too, because it's a pretty lousy book.
It's a lousy book. Right, I agree with you, but then again, it's lousy also everywhere else too. So what you're saying is it's not intended to be a novel, it's intended to be a value textbook.
I think we're in the realm of the supernatural and the metaphysical, and we're applying human standards of logic to something that doesn't really fit.
I get that. I get what you're saying about, I really, really get it about, and this is very Maimonidean of you, which is you're applying human needs and forms and assumptions to, again, he didn't say this, but I'm extrapolating from what he said about other things, but I think he would say it about this. You're applying human needs and forms and law rules to something which is far greater. And so therefore, if you acknowledge that God is far greater, which I think most people would, then you also have to acknowledge that the book which God wrote is also therefore far greater beyond our understanding. I understand that point of view fully. And
I'm glad we could end the class on that note.
I understand that idea
I feel better.
fully. I happen to be from the perspective of God is beyond, but it's not God's book.
Okay.
That's the difference, but I fully understand what you're saying.
I respect that.
One of the paradoxical problems here that indicates there are different authors is that in this passage, God is referred to as Elohim.
Right.
When Moses, it's Yud-Heh Vav-Heh or
Correct.
Yahweh. So so here are two different conflations. We say God for both, but instead of, but here.
Right, because for us, when we're reading this, part of Jewish tradition is not to nitpick about authors, but rather just to see this as still our text.
Yes.
And so therefore, we're not going to refer to God as, Elohim versus Adonai. We're just saying God because this is our text. And only in an environment like this, when we are studying it and thinking about it in a very kind of going deeper into it, do we then start to say, okay, here it says Adonai, here it says Elohim, and therefore we understand it in maybe a deeper level. But by doing so, we compromise a person's ability by doing it the way we do it, we compromise a person's ability to kind of appreciate this theologically and spiritually. Yes, Paul.
Well, I'm driving a rental car in Tel Aviv, looking for my hotel, and I can't quite locate it. And there's a man walking down the street, and I want to invite his attention so I can ask him. I can't just say, hey, mister, or whatever. I have to say, Adoni.
Excuse me, I'm leaving early, but thank you for.
I take that as you walking out of here in disgust.
Thank you.
In disgust. By the way, he knows I'm joking with him. And he knows I do want you to know that we, just in case you're wondering, we talk all the time about how much we appreciate each other's, right? Do we not email back and forth?
I love you, man.
Yeah, me too. So I really just want you all to know that this is part of our, and when he's not here, I'll often say, Arthur might say this about this. So it's two different ways of looking at it, right? It really goes back to what I said to you before about the fact that if you, regardless of what you think about God, regardless of your God view, we can share the same God view, but differ on God's role in the creation of this text, and still share the exact same God view, right? Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? And that's really critical to what's happening, because Arthur and I, what we're doing is we're jousting about not God, we're jousting about the author of this. And what Arthur is saying, correctly is, are you saying that it's beyond God's ability to write a text? Like God can create the universe, but can't put together a book with 5 chapters? Five, you know what I mean? Like, and I would say, good point. It's like, no, I don't put it beyond God. I just don't think that God said this was what I was going to spend my time on, was writing a book. Instead, I've got more important things to do, like making sure the waterfalls continue to go. And that would be my opinion. And he would say, well, why can't God do both? And I'm like, you're right. It's a good point. Like, so that's the essence of this argument. It's not about God. Does God exist, or is God capable? But rather it's just about who wrote this, right? And I happen to think that God didn't write it.
Well,
go ahead, Paul.
To continue my story, I'm looking for my hotel.
Oh, right, Adoni.
There's a man walking down the street. I don't know if he can speak English, but I'm pretty sure he understands Hebrew. So I called to him Adoni.
Is this a true story, or is this a metaphor?
No, it's a true story.
Okay, fine.
So I called to him Adoni.
Yeah.
And he comes over and he ends up speaking English.
Right.
Adoni means my Lord.
Right.
It's related to Adonai. So that's in modern Hebrew, Adoni means, hey, mister, my Lord.
Sir.
Right. And Adonai means.
But Adonai is not Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh. That's a different thing.
Yes.
That's just a transliteration because we don't want to pronounce the name.
Yahweh.
Yeah.
Right. It's not transliteration. It's just like some sort of replacement for it. It's not Yud-Hey, Vav-Hey is pronounced Yehovah, right? And there's nothing about that is Adonai. And that's why scholars refer to it as Yahweh. But that's closest we can come, because it's not, it's Yehovah. And so actually probably the closest you can come to saying God's name is Jehovah.
Yes, that's what the Christians say.
Right, Jehovah. And the way we heard of that, that's actually pretty close. Yehovah was what it would be, not Jehovah, Yehovah. But the point is that, and Adonai is just a proper name replacement for it, because we don't want to, but you can't even say Adonai. You got to say Adoshem, right? It's like, but putting all that insanity aside, yeah, Paul, good point. Adoni, Adonai comes from the same place. All right. Thank you, everybody.